Good evening. Birawagal, Naninya, Birawagal. Welcome, everyone. Welcome. I'm a proud Dharawal woman, a local elder, and my name is Deborah Lennis. I'm also the Cultural Advisor here at Inner West Council. And I have the honour of welcoming you all here this evening on behalf of the elders of the Gadigal and Wangal peoples of the Eora Nation. The Eora lands are bordered by the three rivers of the Hawkesbury to the north, Nepean to the west, Georges to the south, and of course the gorgeous coastline along the east. Within the Eora lands, 29 different languages are spoken. Birawagal, Naninya Birawagal, Gadigal Wan Yaranai Gara, Dai Nari Yarang Guragal, Yanganan Nangun Birawagal Barongni, Di Nai Nara, Ni Nara Naba, Nangun Warren, Nawe Nangubai, Nangana Ganawa Banawa Warawa, Birawagal, Naninya Birawagal. Welcome, everyone, welcome. The Gadigal and Wangal peoples lived here at this place. Tonight, I welcome all of you. Look at this country, the country of the Aboriginal ancestors, past, present and merging. This land is and always will be Aboriginal land, as we've never ceded sovereignty over these lands. However, we lend this land to you tonight to hold this important forum, the Uluṟu Statement from the Heart. Tonight's forum is the beginning of a process in which there is acknowledgement of the past, understanding of the present and embracing the future based on walking together. We are all here to find out how to be involved in the up-and-coming referendum campaign, to enshrine a voice in Parliament for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and into the Australian Constitution. Truth-telling about Australia's real history must sit at the heart of this relationship. It means an honest, respectful acknowledgement of this country's Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and their struggle for justice. Tonight, I'd especially like to welcome the Honourable Linda Burney, Minister for Indigenous Australia. Onya Ani Linda. Senator Pat Dodson for WA. Thank you, brother. The Honourable Joe Halen, Member for Summerhill. Councillor Darcy Byrne, the Mayor of Inner West. We have all of our Inner West councillors that have joined us as well tonight. Congratulations. We have Dean Parkin, Director of the From the Heart campaign. Cheree Toka, the campaigner to fly the Aboriginal flag on the Harbour Bridge. And of course, I'd also like to welcome all my aunties, uncles, brothers and sisters that have joined us in our audience tonight as well. I'd especially like to thank Inner West Council's events team for making tonight happen and inviting me here to welcome each and every one of you. From the Inner West Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities, I say Birawagal, Naninya, Birawagal. Welcome, everyone. Welcome. Thank you.
Well, I'm Darcy Byrne, I'm the Mayor of the Inner West, and that's the best start to a public meeting that I've ever experienced. I begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land and paying respect to their elders, past and present and emerging. I begin also tonight by acknowledging one of our own who can't be with us. A son of Camperdown and Marrickville, has risen to high office. Let us congratulate Anthony Albanese on being elected Prime Minister of Australia. You've all heard the rumours. I can't confirm that Marrickville is to officially be renamed as the national capital. I understand there's some negotiations going on with the Canberrans. So we gather this evening with a new spirit, a spirit of hope and determination. Hope that a decade of division and regression has been superseded by a new era of inclusion and progress. Determination that our nation will be lifted out of the mire of discrimination. That our society will finally come to a real settlement, a treaty with First Nations people. "50 years ago, in launching his 1972 campaign, Gough Whitlam said the following: "There are moments in history when the fate and future of nations can be decided by a single decision. For Australia, now is such a time. Half a century on, let us invoke Gough's vision once more and say, it's time again." We are all here because we know in our bones that the oppression and exclusion of First Nations people has gone on for too long. We're here because we know that the Inner West community must take responsibility for making this change. We're here because there's a referendum to win, and this chance will not come again. I'm very proud that the first action of the newly elected Inner West Council in February was to incorporate the Uluṟu Statement from the Heart into our community strategic plan. But our community's contribution to this historic effort must go much further than that. Our impact will be measured not by how high the yes vote is in the voting booths at Marrickville Town Hall, but by how much we bring people to this cause throughout the rest of this vast continent. Tonight, we are here to listen and to learn about how our community can step up to meet this moment. The leaders we will hear from are people of great substance. The Member for Barton, the Minister for Indigenous Australians Linda Burney, the Senator representing Western Australia, the father of reconciliation, Pat Dodson, our leader in this campaign, the campaign director of From the Heart, Dean Parkin, and the woman who has led the long and soon-to-be successful campaign for the Aboriginal flag to fly proudly and permanently over the Sydney Harbour Bridge, Dulwich Hill local Cheree Toka. And I'll say in conclusion that Cheree is precisely the sort of leader that we need to lift up now if we're going to be successful in this campaign. Cheree, we are proud of you for what you have done for our local community and for First Nations people. Please all be very kind and supportive to Cheree Toka tonight. Now, I just want to ask for your assistance with one minor form of experimentation that we're undertaking here tonight. There's a new platform that's been developed through the NGO sector that's called Civility. The aim is that when you have town hall meetings such as this, people are able to interact in a more sophisticated way, have more input to the meeting itself, and we're trialling that platform here tonight to try to make sure that you're able to be as involved as possible. We want to maximise participation. So I'll just outline for you some of the instructions about Civility. To get a sense of how everyone is feeling, I'd ask you all to log into the Civility platform now. And there were QR codes left on most seats throughout the town hall, and the QR code is also up on the screen before you. The simplest way is to use your phone to scan the QR code on the sheets of paper in the room or on the screen. Once you've done this, just click the heart and away you go. You'll then be asked to share 3 words on how you're feeling. I think we got a pretty good feel for that when Linda was introduced. I'll give you a couple of minutes to do this and we'll see the vibes of the room. Before we hear from our speakers, we would like to get a sense about what you know about the Voice to Parliament as well. Just rate the slider as being either well informed or on the other end not knowing much at all, and we will show you the results up on the screen so that you get an understanding of everybody else in the room and how informed they are. As our guests are speaking, we will also give you the chance to enter comments and questions which will potentially be displayed, if we can get it right, at the conclusion of their contributions. Please be patient with us. If it works well, that's great, and if not, we're still going to have a fantastic night. With that, I'll now introduce the Minister for Indigenous Australians, Linda Burney.
Thank you, Darcy, and I'm so happy to be here as a Marrickville girl in my hood. So welcome to the Inner West Republic of Socialist Republic of Marrickville, I reckon. Balam Ambul, Gadigal Wangul Inyumar Nyadu, Yarabang Morang. I've just said in Wiradjuri, the language of my people. I pay my respects to the ancient Gadigal people and honour their custodianship and care of country. I also pay my respects to the many senior people here tonight from across the Australian community. Thank you so much, Deb, for your wonderful welcome to country. And can I say a massive hello to the many First Nations people that are in the audience tonight. I particularly pay homage to Darcy for pulling this together, as well as the councillors that I met here earlier, to Joe Halen, my neighbour, like literally, and well, just down the road, same street. It's great to have you here, Joe. Thank you so very much. And tonight is an important forum. And I want to just say the steadfast support and the advocacy for First Nations issues in this community is strong, and it's loud, and it's heard. And I particularly want to thank you, Mayor, for your ongoing support as well. And I am so thrilled that in this statement that Darcy spoke about, the Uluṟu Statement from the Heart, is part of the social package of Inner West Council. As we go forward, everyone, on this journey, local government is going to be absolutely crucial to the vision I have for that successful referendum. I see local government as so important in organising forums like tonight and leading the process of truth-telling in this country. And I know that you in the Inner West and the Inner West Council will be champions of that. And you will have a frontline job in informing, educating, and persuading people across our great nation of the merits of the Uluṟu Statement and its history. But before I go on, let's just step back a little bit and look at where the Uluṟu Statement from the Heart came from. In 2015, the then Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull and opposition leader Bill Shorten established a thing called the Referendum Council at the request of First Nation leaders. 13 regional dialogues were held across Australia, in the cities and in the bush, to listen to how First Nations Australians thought the Constitution should be changed. At the end of this process, there was a constitutional convention, as you know, 5 years ago at Uluṟu. It was attended by 250 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander leaders, and that is where the Uluṟu Statement from the Heart was born. The Uluṟu Statement from the Heart is a beautiful, and as our Prime Minister says, it's simple and it's elegant. And I quote, it goes like this, my fellow Marrickville people. We seek constitutional reforms to empower our people and take a rightful place in our own country. When we have power over our destiny, our children will flourish. They will walk in two worlds, and their culture will be a gift to their country. We call for the establishment of a First Nations voice enshrined in the Constitution. That is the key, everyone, enshrined in the Constitution. Makarrata is a culmination of our agenda, the coming together after a struggle. It captures our aspirations for a fair and truthful relationship with the people of Australia. This was to you, not to politicians, and a better future for our children based on justice and self-determination. We seek a Makarrata Commission to supervise a process of agreement-making between governments and First Nations, a truth-telling about our history. Now that's really powerful stuff, isn't it? It's really powerful. But, unfortunately, in 2017, progress on constitutional change was not to be, but it can be with you helping us. I was in the room when the Uluṟu Statement was presented to the then Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull and to then opposition leader Bill Shorten. Turnbull rejected it within a few seconds. But, friends, times have changed. We now have a new government and a new Prime Minister, and his office is just across the road. In his speech on election night, the Prime Minister, the person we know as Albo, the very first thing Anthony said after acknowledging country, just up the road at the Razzle Dazzle, as we all affectionately call it, on behalf of the Australian Labor Party, I commit to the Uluṟu Statement from the Heart in full. It doesn't get much clearer than that. We also have a new leader of the opposition, the Honourable Peter Dutton, who has made it clear he is open to discussion on a voice to the Parliament. Just a couple of weeks ago, I had the honour of delivering Uluṟu O'Donoghue oration. Patrick has done it prior to me. There is no one for whom supporting a referendum for a voice to Parliament represents a bigger political opportunity than for Peter Dutton. Now, you're probably surprised I'm saying that, but it is an opportunity for him to show his much talked about different side and to be on the right side of history for a change. He did walk out on the apology, but we all grow and we all change. There's no shame in that, but we'll see how he goes. Julian Lesser, who works so closely with my dear friend Patrick Dodson on the Uluṟu Statement Select Committee, is now the Shadow Attorney General and, interestingly, the Minister for Indigenous Australians. I think that presents us with an opportunity as well. I've spoken to Julian and assured him that I had worked closely with him. Because when we look back, the desire to change our constitution to recognise First Nations people has a history of bipartisan support. We need to rekindle that now. It might be difficult, but we do. For a successful referendum in this country, the best way to go forward is when you've got the support of all parties in the Parliament. And so many First Nation leaders in this country are motivated and more committed than ever to seeing this thing through. And most importantly, so are you. In the room and listening online, and the questions so many people are asking me, what can I do and what comes next? Well, here's what comes next. I'll start with the second one first, though. We all need to come together, build consensus, be flexible and compromise. Now, with an audience here at Marrickville, I can say those things, and I know that you will rise to the occasion. I'm not so sure in Caboolture. I'm not so sure in other parts of the country. And that is what our challenge is, and that is what we've got to carry. Build consensus, be flexible and compromise. As First Nations leaders across the Parliament and in the community. And this is what we are going to do now. We're going to reach out, having the conversations and building momentum. The Uluṟu Statement from the Heart didn't set out exactly how we could achieve voice, treaty and truth. A matured and inspired approach. That is our job. That is what is in front of us. Which means from this point forward, we have the broadest path to success. Something that I, for one, am very thankful for, as we all work to lay the groundwork for a referendum on a constitutionally enshrined voice to the Parliament. Building on the work that has been done on regional voices by people like Tom Calma, Marcia Langton, Patrick Dodson and Julian Lesser, and listening to the advice of First Nations people about constitutional enshrinement like Dean. This brings me to the second question and why I'm sure many of you are here tonight. What can I do? And the answer is exciting, energising, and I hope a bit of fun. Because now is the time for community groundswell. I like that saying, let 1,000 flowers bloom. It's what you want to do, what you can do to take forward this argument, not waiting from people like us to say this is what you can do. Inner West Council hasn't. You've pulled together this amazing audience. This is the start. The NRL and the AFL have voiced their support for Uluṟu. We need other codes in sport, local clubs, local pubs, the Red Devils up in Marrickville, why not? I'm sure many of you here tonight can be part of building that support. It is what you feel you can do. Have dinner parties, have afternoon teas, whatever you like. So many in the corporate sector have come on board, and I'm getting more and more every day. And this shows real leadership in wanting to be part of growing Australia up. I have been so humbled and impressed by the hunger for a voice to Parliament among multicultural communities, religious groups and churches, even the Pope, and small businesses. And as I said at the outset, local government will have an absolutely critical role to play. Where Council has backed the Uluṟu Statement from the heart is in a place that I was at yesterday called Gladstone in central Queensland. Absolutely astounding. If your council hasn't already done so, then get out there, but we don't have to say that in the Socialist Republic of Marrickville. Start with your family, friends and your workmates. Be loud and proud about your support online. Write to your local politicians, sorry Joe, and get all of those groups you are part of to come on board. Chambers of Commerce, church and religious groups, Probus, Quota, Rotary, Lions, CWA, the community sector, unions, guides, scouts, lifesavers as well, lag care and local sporting groups, volunteer groups. Everyone can have a leadership role in taking this forward. Be inspired. We cannot do it without you. We just can't. Remember, for those of you that were part of the Women for Week movement, town hall meetings is what we had, and we got there. Can I finish up by saying, in all your conversations, tell people why a voice to Parliament matters. It matters because the social justice outcomes for First Nations people are deplorable. There needs to be a ruler over what governments do. We're seeing in South Australia, they are moving ahead with a voice to the Parliament. This isn't scary change at all. The Uluṟu Statement asks for a voice that was advisory, maintaining the supremacy of Parliament. It hasn't asked for veto powers, but it has also asked for a voice in the Constitution so it could not be silenced. And that's where you come in as well. You will all vote in that referendum. And you have to get your friends to vote the way that you're going to vote. Or this voice can't be abolished for telling inconvenient truths. If we had a voice to Parliament from the beginning, from Federation, I do actually believe there may not have been a stolen generation. There may not have been an intervention in the Northern Territory. Children like me would have been able to learn and continue our language and culture at school, that rather than hide out of shame. And I think we will be much closer to closing the gap. This is not symbolic, everyone. This will make a difference to social justice issues because we would have more policies and programs that work and less wasteful duplication. The bottom line is this. Many of the ideas of the Uluṟu Statement are not new, but their time has well and truly come. Along with Patrick Johnson, I worked with Lower Cheree Donohue's groundbreaking report when she was the chair of ATSIC in '95. It was called Recognition, Rights and Reform. Remember that, Pat? which call for a better relationship between First Nations people and the Parliament, changes to the Constitution and a treaty. It was 1995. Before handing over, I'll leave you with one final moving quote from the Uluṟu Statement from the Heart, and it's this. In 1967, we were counted. In 2017, we seek to be heard. We leave base camp and start our trek across this vast country. We invite you to walk with us in a movement of the Australian people for a better future. Thank you, Marrickville.
Thank you, Linda. Now, before I introduce Dean, we've asked people about how much they are aware of The Voice, and we encourage people to log in questions and comments through the Civility app, and I'm told that some of those responses will be provided shortly on the screen. Some of the feedback that was being provided while Linda was speaking was very moving. I'd now like to introduce Dean Parkin, the campaign director of the From the Heart campaign. Dean is a highly respected person who is both strategic and an outstanding leader in the Aboriginal community and in the broader community, and we're lucky to have him guiding us on this campaign. Please welcome Dean Parkin.
Auntie, thank you very much for the very warm welcome to country. Obviously, I want to pay my respects to the Gadigal people of the Eora Nations on the land on which we gather. I pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and I bring greetings from my peoples, the Quandamooka peoples from Indirabar, or as you may know it, North Stradbroke Island, which is just off the coast of Brisbane. If you haven't been there, you should go. It is Marrickville's a beautiful place. I used to live down the road at Leichhardt, but home country is very stunning. I also want to acknowledge my old people too, those that have gone before, and those that are still with us. They're still there. They're still providing the guidance. And I just want to pick up on something that that Linda just said before about the Minister Burney. Which way should I go? Linda. Okay. The reference to the Recognition, Rights and Reform report. As people that are involved in the campaign, we've got to understand the history of where this comes from. And I think there were many people on that Saturday night a couple of weeks ago when they heard now Prime Minister Anthony Albanese mention very prominently, very early in his speech, this commitment to the Uluṟu Statement, this commitment to a referendum, to a voice, to Parliament enshrined in the Constitution. And I know that there were some people, probably, well, political tragics like myself, sitting there watching the election coverage and watching the speech being given, wondering whether this was just a bolt out of the blue. What's this Uluṟu Statement from the heart? We've got to remember this. There's many people out there that were sitting there on that night going, what is this Uluṟu Statement from the heart? And then what's this voice to Parliament that he's talking about? And we know that 27 years ago, our previous voice, or one of our previous voices, ATSIC, was handing a report to then Prime Minister Paul Keating in response to the Mabo decision as part of the social justice package, with a whole range of measures, as Linda talked about. Auntie Lewitcher, Chair, I believe the chair of the committee that drafted the report that you were involved in was Uncle Charlie Perkins. And now Minister Linda Burney was one of the authors of that report. And Senator, I believe you were as well. And that report recommended recognising Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in the Constitution. So nearly 3 decades ago, we were submitting then back to the Prime Minister. And obviously then we've had the Uluṟu Statement from the heart. We've had a whole a series of decades between then and the Uluṟu Statement, where a lot of work was done, and again, both Linda and Patrick were at the forefront. I mean, this is going to be a bit of a broken record story here about how many times these two leaders and others have been at the coalface, have been at the national level talking about this. I imagine you must just about be sick of it. That's another reason why we just got to get it done this term. The amount of times we've talked about recognition, the place of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples in this country, a real voice for our people, so we've got a say over the issues that are important to us. The Uluṟu Statement gave this direction. There'd been a sense of, well, we were talking about recognition. What does real, meaningful recognition look like to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people? Linda talked about the 13 regional dialogues. Part of the reason why I have a lifelong love of the Uluṟu Statement from the heart was that I had the great privilege of standing at the front of rooms, many like this, listening to our people talk about what was important to them. What meaningful, if we're going to do this process of recognising our mob in the Constitution, finally and formally, after 234 years of the modern Australian nation, come to the very simple, real recognition of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the first peoples of this country, then what does meaningful recognition look like? And let's be honest, there were some really heated discussions. There were very passionate discussions. Our people come at this through the lens of culture, through the lens of deep intelligence, deep experience, very, very generous in what they were giving, some even cynical leading into that process about whether we were actually going to see the changes, going to the well yet again to say what was important to us, yet again, yet again, yet again. How many times? And the people said, well, look, we want to do this recognition piece. We've wanted to do it for a very long time. But if we're going to do it, it's got to be meaningful. It's got to have an impact on the lives of our people. We can't just hammer in a little plaque into the Constitution, tick a box and make everybody else feel good about themselves and let's move on. There are too many issues facing our peoples in our communities, and so the people that were involved in those rooms were speaking from the direct, many of them talked about their young people. They were talking about their hopes, their dreams, the futures of their young people. How is it through this process that we can do something for them? And so through that process, through the 13 regional dialogues, through the Uluṟu Constitutional Convention, that again I had the great privilege of being part of, co-facilitating that, hearing the statement read for the very first time, 430 words after all of those years, saying what is it that we want? If we're going to do this, what do we want? 430 words, the Uluṟu Statement from the heart. It takes you 3 minutes to read. Read it, and read it again, and read it again, because our people have put a lot of work into that. Yes, we've had some political headwinds, but I want you to remember that the Uluṟu Statement wasn't actually issued to any Prime Minister, any political party, any government. Read it. It's issued to you. It's an invitation to you, the people of Australia. It's a standing invitation. It's still there, and the invitation still needs to be responded to. So actually, this is a role for us. We need the government on board, and we have got that commitment. It has been sometimes a trying 5 years to keep this alive, but the reason why we have is because it's been people like yourselves that have refused to let it go. And in the 5 years that I've had thousands of conversations with people across the country, and I have been to those towns. I've been in calls like this, and I've been in some of those towns. The thing that is driving this, the thing that is driving the support, and the thing that is going to win this is actually very, very simple. And the reason why it's still alive and it hasn't been politically sidelined or destroyed is that at its core, Australians just get it. They get that this is actually just a really fair thing to do. This issue is striking out that somewhat stereotypical, sometimes, put in a very jingoistic way, this idea of a fair go. It's actually hitting that point. So before we even get into conversations around models and representation and parliaments and constitutions, this is striking a very deep chord with people about this is just the fair thing to do. And they get the idea of a voice. They get the idea of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, the ones that know what's happening in our communities, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in this community that understand the issues in Marrickville, the ones in Mount Druitt that understand the issues there, and in Arakoon, and in Halls Creek. These places, it's about getting those voices, and many of them have been previously unheard. You can read all the reports in Canberra. They all say the same thing. How are we going to fix health? How are we going to fix education? How are we going to fix housing? How are we going to fix all of these issues that we keep hearing about year after year after year in the Closing the Gap reports? They will say the same thing, and I can write the recommendations of the next report even before I know what the issue is going to be. We've got to empower the voices of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people over our issues. We've got to have a direct say. We've got to have our mob, our aunties on the ground, sitting at the table with the politicians and the bureaucrats, looking at the policies and the laws, giving advice. This is actually going to be a tool that empowers better decision making in the parliaments. We're going to get better outcomes, we're going to get better value for taxpayer spend. It is a very, very practical change. I've heard some commentary in the news since the election that we should be focused on the practical issues. There is no more practical change than giving our people a real voice. And for it to be meaningful and for it to have effect over the long term, it's got to have that constitutional guarantee, because the organisation that first proposed this 27 years ago no longer exists, and the organisation that replaced it no longer exists. So the constitutional guarantee when we're talking about the issues facing our communities, children in out-of-home care, incarceration, juvenile justice, we're not going to fix these in a 3-year electoral cycle. We're not even going to fix them in 2. This is a multi-generational target. These are multi-generational tasks and challenges facing us. And so that voice, some of the targets that are out there at the moment close the gap on the incarceration rate. So just to get to parity on the Indigenous incarceration rate versus the non-Indigenous incarceration rate in this country, we're looking at a 71-year target. All of us will be gone. The only people that will be alive are very young Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander girls, and I think we might be getting to the point where the old men that are going to be at that ceremony on the current target, they might be just being born right now. So that's the scale of the task that's facing many of our communities, and this voice with the constitutional guarantee is absolutely necessary. And we also get to finally and formally deal with this question of recognising our people properly. We get that very simple recognition. And that's something that every single Australian then can connect to. When we have that recognition, when we finally recognise our people as the first peoples of this country, that's a story that everybody can connect to. What it truly and genuinely and uniquely means to be Australian. Not barbecues, not wineries, not beaches, not mateship, but a connection to the oldest continuous culture on earth. That's the prize on offer for all of us. I just want to finish up with 2 things since the election, and a bit of a challenge to you all, specifically this room. I'm going to target you. Unfairly maybe, but there you go, I've got the stage. Firstly, there's been a lot of commentary, and people have gotten quite excited since the election. And they're, what's this thing going to look like? What's the detail? What's the technical elements of it? How's it going to work? Blah, blah, blah. And I understand that desire. I understand people wanting to get engaged. That will come. But I can tell you as I stand here right now, that's not going to be the thing that wins us this. I can understand the desire for detail. We've got to make sure that it looks safe. It's something that the country can live with. As Linda said, it upholds parliamentary supremacy. It doesn't challenge that. Your vote will count the same. Your democratic rights won't change a single bit. We know that. So that detail will come, and people get a chance to look at that before the referendum. We've got to keep having this conversation around saying, you know what? This is the fair thing to do. We're going to tap into those people that haven't heard about this. We know this. I know this through the conversations I've had directly with people. And some people even can be quite awkward around this sometimes. But you have the conversation, you come with a generous and open spirit to include people, This is not a 51-49% conversation we're having here. We've got to go beyond that. We've got to bring more people in. And so we've got to have this conversation with people. It's just the fair thing to do. We're going to see a practical change, and this is a chance to bring the country together. There's a chance to unify the nation around something that's genuinely going to move us forward as a nation. That's very appealing. It's striking at the heart. So I encourage you not to get distracted, diverted, taken down the rabbit hole. Have the conversation with people at that level. That's the opening. That's the way that we're going to start bringing more people into this. And the challenge for you, I want to just sort of finish on this point. I stood at those rooms, I heard the conversations. And you know what? There was some disagreement from our mob too, because that's natural, right? We're just a community just like anybody else that has different views about the way of the world. And we've got to respect those different views. We absolutely do. But we also got to respect the historic consensus that the Uluṟu Statement created and then issued to you and invited you. And I know sometimes people get a bit sketchy when they say that, well, they support the Uluṟu Statement, it means something to them, we're supportive of a referendum on a voice, and then they'll hear a dissenting view, and they'll hear a dissenting view from an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander person and then get a bit jammed up. What do I do? What do I do? You're allowed to do both. You're allowed to respect the difference of opinion, and I encourage you to do so, and you are allowed to maintain your conviction and belief that this is the right thing for us to do as a country. So I'm going to ask you, when you get out there and support, and when you get out there and advocate, if you want to be a real ally, you want to be part of this, you need to be staunch alongside us. I might just stop there, but thank you for your time, and great to be here.
Thanks so much, Dean, and you can see why he's doing such a great job of building the movement that we need to win this thing. I now just want to change pace a little bit and introduce Cheree Toka. And I want to just tell you a little bit first about what I know of Cheree's campaign. I probably met Cheree, I don't know, half a decade ago, 5 years ago, when she'd really just kicked it off, and she was literally a young person who'd noticed that the Aboriginal flag wasn't flying on the Harbour Bridge and refused to accept that that was right. And began by just talking to local politicians, trying to get in to talk to the government without much success, and then going out and speaking to third parties, to non-government organisations, to the board, to P&Cs and the boards of childcare centres, to ask them to sign her change.org petition. 170,000 people now have signed that petition. And a few months ago, the New South Wales Premier made an announcement that after several years of trying not to have to meet with Cheree and giving her a series of excuses that didn't make much sense about why the flag couldn't fly there, that they were reversing their position and that they now agreed that the Aboriginal flag should fly permanently on the Harbour Bridge. And the only problem is that the Premier still hasn't met with Cheree and the flag's still not flying. So, Dominic Perrottet, if you're listening, it's time to meet with this young leader and it's time to get that flag flying proudly and permanently over the Harbour Bridge. Please welcome Cheree Toka.
Sandra, would you like to come up? So I'd like to welcome the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation and pay my respects to First Nations people, past and present. Yama, my name is Cheree Toka and I'm a proud Kamilaroi woman. Today I have Sandra DeParis, a representative from Amnesty International, who will be saying a few things as she was very instrumental in supporting this campaign. I started the campaign to fly the Aboriginal flag on the Sydney Harbour Bridge permanently. The reason I initiated the campaign related to my concern that if the national flag is proudly flown on one of Australia's most iconic structures in the world, then respectfully, why doesn't the Aboriginal flag that represents the first culture to live, breathe and own the land have equal status? I did some research, and in order to get the answers I was seeking, I needed to start a paper-based petition and collect 10,000 public signatures to lodge into New South Wales Parliament. This allowed the matter to be considered and debated. Without this unnecessary step in the process, perhaps a decision could have been made sooner. After 3 years of relentless campaigning through the streets of Sydney, with the help and support of many volunteers, Amnesty International, the Labor Party, and perhaps many of you in this room this evening, we managed to get 10,000 handwritten signatures. What really pushed us over the line was the extraordinary help from an early childhood education centre located in Crow's Nest, who also engaged several other centres to help collect signatures. In 2020, we lodged the petition into Parliament and the matter was debated. The debate went seemingly well and all was in favour. The previous Minister for New South Wales Transport, Mr Constance, commended our accomplishments and highlighted how strongly he personally felt towards supporting the campaign. A few weeks later, Mr Constance's office sent me a ministerial stating to erect a third flagpole in the bridge was too costly and that having a third flagpole would compromise the structural integrity of the bridge. This statement presented with no evidence. As you could imagine, hearing those words was upsetting, but it made me more determined. It indicated that the government who was leading our nation did not want to fly the Aboriginal flag for reasons I will leave with you to assume. How did an ethical and respectful request turn into a 3-year fight? During those 3 years, I endured all forms of rejection, shame and backlash from the people of Australia, but it never stopped me from pursuing the end goal. My secret was, although the internet is extremely powerful, it is also extremely harmful, and so I stayed away from it the best I could. I did not have Facebook or Instagram. Instead, I started a digital petition on change.org that has over 170,000 signatures and a GoFundMe that has raised over $40,000. The GoFundMe was initiated to overrule the too costly excuse from New South Wales Transport. The campaign continued for another 2 years until finally, the morning of February the 6th, 2022, the New South Wales Premier decided to support the initiative and bring the timeline forward for the Aboriginal flag to permanently fly on the bridge. 4 months later, the Aboriginal flag still isn't a permanent fixture on the bridge, and I won't stop until the flag flies high and proud and a simple yet powerful change is achieved. It's been a challenging journey to say the least, but it has led me to believe that with hard work, consistency and persistence, change can be achieved. The fire in my belly is too strong to allow any government to tell me that First Nations respect is not paramount. I'll leave it with Sandra.
Thank you, Cheree. And I won't add too much, but I just wanted to add on behalf of Amnesty, we've been supporting Cheree's campaign from the beginning, and when she first told me about it, my impression was very much, adding another flag on the bridge, adding a flagpole, it's going to take, 6 months? And here we are 5 years later. Yeah. It's been an extremely challenging journey for adding a flagpole on the bridge. It shouldn't take that long, and it is not okay to think that it takes so long to achieve an extra flag on the bridge. We shouldn't have to go along all of these troubles and all of these challenges to really get something like this done. So I think it's a really good example of how fighting and not letting go can help us in achieve great outcomes, because whilst it's just a flag on the bridge, the meaning is obviously immense, and we will never be able to measure it. So there may be people that are saying it is just a flag, it doesn't mean anything, but it's all about the recognition. It's all about seeing in there in the most important landmark in Sydney. So it's such an important campaign, and we hope that there will be an outcome in the next couple of months, and we'll be able to see it coming. We've never been so close, so it's a bit of luck what will be happening pretty soon. Thank you.
online, so if you'd like to pose a question, please do go in through the QR code. One question that is coming up repeatedly, and I'm going to put this to Senator Dodson in the first instance. It's a fairly simple one, but I suspect it's a very complicated answer. How will the referendum work? So what is the actual process for the referendum occurring? What needs to happen prior to it being commenced?
Can I speak from here? Firstly, I acknowledge the Gadigal people and the leaders that are here tonight, and I pay my respects to you all. The referendum requires an act of Parliament, and it requires a set of words that have been agreed to go into the Constitution. So the set of words are critical to the proposition, which is normally yes or no, do you support this or don't you? Yes or no. And there are machinery things about a no case that can be supported, required to be supported, and a yes case. It's fairly conservative, the Referendum Act that governs the processes. At the end of it, what's really required is a majority of voters in a majority of the states, except for the Northern Territory, which I think that's the voters are counted but not the territory. And that may be true of the ACT as well. So when the Minister spoke before of the critical nature of getting support across Australia, we have a very high bar. A majority of the voters in those jurisdictions and a majority of our states. So we've got 4 Labor states at least. Hopefully they'll come across. But we've got to get a fairly big contingent of the Australian population in all jurisdictions supporting us, and then the states themselves have got to be in support. So this is not an easy task. The clarity around the words, and that's a challenge to the First Nations as much as it is to anyone else, is to settle that as soon as possible or as quickly as we can within the process of the Albanese government. We only get 3 years to do the many things we want to do, and this is one of them we want to do, but we cannot do that without your commitment and the commitment of every other voter. So people need to be on the roll, need to understand the process and turn up to vote when the referendum's held.
Dean, can I just extend that question to you from a political campaign perspective? What will the referendum campaign entail? How far before the referendum will we know the date? What's the structure, as it stands now, what's the structure that we can expect to be able to undertake community education and civic engagement?
Well, it started 5 years ago, and our campaign started the minute the Uluṟu Statement was issued to the people. And so, and there are a bunch of mechanisms that will be led by the government, and obviously with the heavy involvement of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples in that to finalise, as Senator Dodson has said, the constitutional provision, and also to give people confidence that when they're talking about a voice to Parliament, they know what they're getting in behind and supporting, and that, as I said, that this is inherently a fair and very practical and something that people can get behind, that this is going to have a real impact on the lives of our peoples. So so those processes will happen. We are absolutely strongly supportive of the government's clear commitment to a referendum this term. We've said that we'd like to see that. Our campaign has said we'd like to see that in 2023 as our objective. Strike while the iron is hot, and really pull the people along on this. But fundamentally, our main task, as everyone has said, in whether it's this campaign or it's the campaign for the flag on the bridge, is to broaden and deepen the support of the Australian people. And I'll say one thing on this, which is also important for your own advocacy and your own support. The experience that I've had in the last 5 years, and what's borne out through our own very detailed research, is that when you have a conversation about this with somebody who hasn't heard about it, and there's a good chunk, there's about 25 to 30% of the Australian population that hasn't engaged on it. When you have a conversation, they're more likely to be supportive than they are to oppose. There is a deep well of goodwill that is there for us to tap into. And so it is about just opening the arms, opening the hearts, welcoming people into this conversation and making it easy for people to get behind and support it. So we will do the mechanisms. There's certain things that the Constitution mandates that says this is the way that referendums have to be run. Those processes will be met. But this is going to be, it started with and will end with and will be won by the people. That's where our focus is.
I think you can say that after such an inauspicious beginning with the response from Prime Minister Turnbull at the time and some of the more irresponsible things that were said by government ministers, the fact that you've been able to keep the momentum going through half a decade is an achievement in and of itself.
There's been a lot of hard work by a lot of people. It's not just our campaign, people across the board. And we haven't done it. It's been completely independent of government, obviously. The work and the reason why we're having this is because people have refused to let it go. The prize is too big. The moment is too real and it's too near. And so that gives me a lot of confidence. Now, we know that this is going to be a challenge for us. But we wouldn't have proposed this 27 years ago, and the mob wouldn't have issued the Uluṟu Statement from the heart if we didn't think... I'm not sitting here, and nobody's sitting here thinking that a noble failure is on the cards here. We think, we're very confident, and we have a strong belief that we're going to win this, and we're going to win it with you. And that's been the experience that I've had so far, and that's why I just have enormous faith that this is something that we are going to get over the line.
Well, one of the questions that's coming through the chat is about bipartisanship, and Linda, you spoke about this in your remarks. What realistically are the chances of getting the opposition to really support this campaign?
Well, it's not just going to be the opposition. If we are going to get bipartisanship across the Parliament, it is, of course, the opposition or the coalition, and that is a combination of the Liberals and the Nationals. The Greens are pretty close to the balance of power with two independents, which would be the Jackie Lambie party in the upper house. And the mechanisms that Patrick spoke about are really important to understand. And what needs to happen sequentially in the Parliament is super important. But like Patrick said, the most important thing in the first step is to establish what is it, or what is the question to you, and what will be reflected in the Constitution. We also now have 16 independents in the House of Representatives. A lot of the Teals, the Catters, the Bats, the Wilkies, and so forth. So my job really is, along with Patrick and Melinda McCarthy and others, is to, and Dean has his ways and other people, you've all got connections, is to, I think, now you can say, well, why do we have to do this? But what Dutton has said is that we haven't seen the words, which is an easy thing for anyone to say. We want to not just have symbolism, and we want to understand how this is going to affect the daily lives of our people. So that's our collective challenge. But there are good people in the opposition that you obviously work with, but if the minister couldn't carry the day in his party room, then I'll leave you to think about that. So, in my view, the job of From the Heart and Patrick and I and others is to see, and the Prime Minister, and you've got to make sure you respect that position of Prime Minister who has the discussions with the leaders of the other parties. Now, the obvious question is, well, if you can't get bipartisanship, what do you do? And we haven't got to that point yet, but we may well get to that point. And that's where you've got to make a call. Do you do it without bipartisanship? I hope that that's not the case. But I can't probably say at a public forum what I'd like to say in the sense of some of the challenges, except to say that in the coalition, today or yesterday, the 6th Senate spot was declared in South Australia. It's a First Nations woman whom I've got a fair bit of faith in, unlike my faith in some others. But so it's finding where you can build those relationships. I've already spoken to a number of the Teal independents, and I'm speaking to more of them tomorrow. So, you know, the challenge is huge, but it has to be confronted or dealt or negotiated. And that's why I made the point in my speech that at the end of the day, a negotiation and compromise might be necessary. But you know where your nadir is. And that's what we figure out. And that's what self-determination's about. I don't know if that answers your question. I know you wouldn't compromise on that, ever. No, sister, you would not compromise on that.
If I can...
No, I'm not talking about any of those things. I'm talking...
Okay, if I can just...
That's exactly why we need a voice.
If I can just call the meeting to order, if I could just call the meeting to order, I will come back to you momentarily for a question.
No, wait on, sister. Wait a minute. This is just one way that we'll do it. We'll go out to the bush. We'll do all the things we need to do. We will travel this country.
Yeah, okay. Can I put a question? If I can just call the meeting to order. Sorry. I'm not seeking to, but I'm just hoping I can put a question to Senator Dodson about the point you've raised.
Sure.
Okay. Can I put a question to Senator Dodson, if that's okay? I want to...
Oh, go away.
If I can...
Go away.
If I can call the meeting to order, please. If I could just call the meeting to order, please.
No, that's not right.
I'm going to respectfully request of... I'm going to... I'm going to respectfully request that we can continue to conduct the meeting without interjections, but I will come back to people with further questions. I want to put a question related to the issues that have been raised to Senator Dodson. Obviously, after so much mistreatment from government, the challenge of engaging with First Nations communities about this campaign is going to be a really difficult one. Can you tell us a bit about what those challenges are and what the key things are that the government needs to be aware of in educating people about the referendum?
Well, I think you saw a pretty good example of the kind of issues that across Australia this process is going to be confronted by. There is obviously the need for... It's about structural change and it's about political change. It's not another program that we're trying to devise here. This is about dealing with the legacy of over 200 years of denial, suppression, attempts at extinguishment, and all of those things, the high levels of incarceration, taking of kids away into homes, the degree of poverty, the powerless or the tyranny of our dispossession, I think the statement talks about. Now, they're all realities, and no one's trying to deny that in this process. No. But if we are going to systemically change the relationship of the First Nations peoples to the Parliament or to the polity of this nation, then we've got to start with a referendum that enshrines a voice in the Constitution. And then the very things that the ladies here and others will raise can be advocated in that forum where it counts. I'm not saying it doesn't count here in the Republic of Marrickville, but where it does count and where they can advocate and constantly shine a light on it until there is a response by the government and the Parliament. Now, what a great opportunity that is going to be, not only for us as Australians, but for the First Nations peoples, not just to have representatives of the quality of the Minister here, or myself, or this other young lass that's just been voted in on the Liberal side. We represent our parties, and we do have a consciousness of First Nations affairs. This will be First Nations people themselves devising the mechanisms and the capacities and the agenda and the strategy without the interference of the bureaucrats or anyone else determining how they're going to go forward, carrying that responsibility and that intelligence and actually interfacing at the highest level of our democratic structure, the Parliament of Australia.
Our sisters were raising around mental health and that. Patrick makes it, they're very important. And Patrick makes a very good point. I represent the people of Barton. I also happen to be the Minister for Aboriginal Australians. But it's not, it has to come from you, the community. Not what we think, not what we say, but listening to everybody, including people that disagree with this process, including people that may have a different perspective. And that's what I mean about building a negotiation. And it's going to be really hard. There are many of our communities, particularly in remote Australia, that have no idea of what you're talking about if you start talking about a voice. There are many people out there in the broader Australian community that are the same. So our job, like Dean was saying, is to get the message out and give people a say. But Patrick's also very correct. We want to try and do it within a 3-year time frame. So it's about how you step those things out. And we will get there with that. We're not ready to say it tonight, but it will happen. What we're saying tonight is that every single individual can have and be empowered to take this on as something where you might want to change one mind, reinforce another, and how you do it is your choice. That's why I'm saying local government's so powerful, because local government can do this, can bring people together. But it's crucial that the government absolutely operates from a base of self-determination. And that is Aboriginal people making the big decisions and me taking it through the cabinet process. That's the really important part.
Well, speaking of reaching out to unusual constituencies, Cheree, did you say it was the Crow's Nest Childcare Centre that helped get behind your campaign?
Yes.
How did you manage to turn the good burgers of Crow's Nest into left-wing political activists?
Oh, I didn't have an influence. They approached me about it and they wanted to jump on board, and they didn't influence the kids. The kids learn about the campaign. They learn about what the Aboriginal flag represented and who the Aboriginal flag represented, and the children wanted it just as much as the kids who were the teachers who were facilitating the campaigning around it. So they got roughly 60 other alternative early childhood education centres on board as well, which is terrific. You know, it always starts at the ground up. So if we're teaching the young the right thing in terms of basic human rights and equality, I think it will stem, obviously, when they are older.
On that note, there's an excellent children's book that I think is called Where's My Heart? Is that right? Written by Tom Smayer? Is that the name of it?
Yeah, it's the children's version of Finding the Heart of the Nation. I should know the name of the book, but I didn't write it, so...
My kids who've just arrived have a copy, and if you have small children, it's a beautiful book, really wonderfully illustrated and very powerful, and a great way to communicate with kids about why this is so important. Cheree, one more question to you. We're about to hear a bit of feedback in a minute about, or we'll see on the screen, about how much awareness there is in this room of what the voice to Parliament is and the statement from the heart is. What's your impression about how aware young people are about this? How much work do we have to do to build up that awareness amongst both young First Nations people and non-Indigenous people too?
Yeah, I think it's really important, obviously, to touch the younger generation in terms of, obviously, my age bracket, 20s and even younger. I brought my younger brother and his partner along today, and they're in their 20s, and I think it's really important for them to learn what this actually means, and means, obviously, for my brother being an Indigenous person himself. I think it's really important to have, obviously, great representatives in the room to talk about and discuss what this means for our future as Aboriginal people and obviously as Australians. And yeah, that's pretty much it, yeah.
Okay, we're about to...
So far.
I'm going to go in just a moment to try and get some feedback up on the screen about people's awareness. But Dean, we're also getting a lot of questions about how people can get involved, or a lot of people getting in the chat to say, my friends are already convinced.
Yep.
How can I get involved? How can I volunteer? Do you want to tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, there's a couple of things that you can do. So you can obviously look at our campaign website, fromtheheart.com.au. There's plenty of information, plenty of resources, fact sheets, frequently asked questions, those sorts of things that can help you build up your understanding of what's being proposed. I caution against trying to think that you have to be an expert on this sort of thing.
Yeah.
You actually just can get out there and start yarning. You actually can just get out there, and actually that's incredibly powerful. It's incredibly powerful when people in your own communities hear something from you, whether you be that person at the barbecue or that person while you're waiting in the coffee line, just to have a yarn. Those little micro engagements and conversations on a day-to-day basis are going to count. They really are. We're going to have more set pieces like this, town halls, big speeches, big events, and we're going to get lots of people involved, and that's going to be great. But the power of this is going to be in those day-to-day conversations about why this is important to you. We are going to build further capacity into the campaign. We've spent everything that we've had to keep this going. Now that we have the government on board, willing to and ready to deliver, we are very, very quickly ramping up this campaign. We're going to be the Yes campaign, and we're going to have the resources. Darcy, we've already had a yarn about providing some support to local level efforts to empower people to have these conversations on the ground. So keep an eye out on fromtheheart.com.au, sign up and subscribe so that when we are launching these initiatives, we're in the process of developing a digital education resource that we're going to share freely amongst organisations that really breaks down the simplicity of what we're talking about. So the more people that you can get to sign up, to get involved on the website and stuff like that, you will then see as we're launching our actions, as we're launching our local community initiatives, you'll be front of the line to be at that, getting involved, getting the information, and really amplifying the effort. So that's where I'd start people and watch this space, because this is going to move very, very quickly, and we're going to want people on board with our key messaging, with our key approaches. It's going to be very, very simple, but don't wait for that. Just get out there and start yarning now.
Well, to that end, I want to make a commitment on behalf of the Inner West community tonight that the Council will support the training of 1,000 local citizens to support the Voice to Parliament campaign and the referendum campaign. If you're willing to step up and be one of those people who can help build this campaign, I'll ask you to log in now to the Civility app and to provide us your details. We won't contact you about anything else. You won't be spammed, but we will let you know when training's on and other ways that you can contribute to building the campaign here in the Inner West. With that, I want to now introduce Senator Pat Dodson to talk to us about the path ahead to close this evening. He's come a very long way and made a very big effort to be here. So could I ask you to please join me in giving Senator Pat Dodson a very big, warm welcome.
When the Mayor said I've come a very long way, I wasn't sure he was referring to my age or the geographical distance. Driving in from the airport, I thought of the 1938 day of mourning leaders who sought a voice in the Parliament back then when Joe Lyons was the Prime Minister. And of course that never eventuated. And those great leaders, if you don't know them, you should read about them, because the cause for representation, recognition in the Parliament over the affairs of Aboriginal people have been there for a long time. And you might recall that Menzies at the time was wanting to shunt most people off to the Northern Territory. So the other thing I thought about was a fellow who was in the British Army, Watkins Tench, he and some others were sent out to go and bring back 10 First Nations people's heads in bags, somewhere around Sydney here, and he actually negotiated to mitigate the number down to about 9. So the conflicting stories of our nation and challenging currents of our understanding, I think tonight we've had a fairly clear appeal for us to come together to find what in the Reconciliation Council days was the common ground. We can always divide and we can always find a lot of division and reasons for not liking people or working with people. But I think tonight the message clearly was, let's find common ground amongst us for a common cause. And the common cause, of course, is to get a successful referendum across Australia, not just here in Marrickville or in this state, but across this great country. So if you focus on the common ground, even with the bigots and those who are ignorant, try to get them to see that we do have common ground as Australians. We have the common mission of bringing honour to this nation by having a successful referendum. That's the common ground. Find what it is that the bigots and others have not thought of about we who are pro-supportive can find common ground with them and help then develop from that point what you might be able to do together with them. And in that process, of course, there was a terrible word during the native title debates called extinguishment. Try to extinguish these divisions between peoples by focusing on what the positive things are. And obviously as a local government and the Mayor's account of 1,000 workers valiantly in this space is a fantastic thing to get that response in a place like Marrickville. Maybe it's just because I'm a stranger. I don't realise how readily you volunteer for hard tasks, but that is a really marvellous thing. And to be advocates, so help people understand what a referendum process is, make sure they are on the roll, make sure they understand what the question is and why a voice to Parliament is so significant, so that the pain and the hurt and the frustration and the denial of Aboriginal people can at last be heard in that great forum, the Parliament, where we are privileged to sit and advocate and argue for our party's policies and for things to improve the lives of Aboriginal people. So work towards the extinguishment of division and discord and try to diminish fear. There's no fear here. There's nothing to be afraid of. This is an enhancement to us as a nation. A successful referendum recognising and entrenching a voice in the Constitution is an enhancement for us all. This is our Constitution, the Australian Constitution, not some British Constitution or someone else's. This is what we do as Australians. So find a way to diminish ignorance and fear. I think that was a very clear message coming through, and you are capable of it as a local government and as members of many other different organisations and of interest groups. I support the Rabbitohs, mind you. This is a work of change. That's probably why Albo's given me this gig. But this is about change. Have no misunderstanding, my friends. This is the beginning, a new step to change the terrible indictment this nation has got upon it, the blight that it has upon it, from the way First Nations peoples have been treated from day one. This is to rectify, this is the journey to start to rectify that. It'll take us some time, but you are part of the first step in getting a successful referendum. And I think that should give us some pride. We've seen the pride for trying to get the flag across the Sydney Harbour Bridge. I remember that in '88, I think it was, when we all marched here. The flag was flying there off a chopper or something, and some little dogman was holding onto it. But the pride that this will bring to us, and pride helps transform disillusionment, hopelessness, frustration, exclusion. These are the factors that the voice will symbolises. In reality, it gives the mechanism through which these frustrating encounters of First Nations peoples can be articulated in the halls of power that make laws and sets up policies and is judged by how it behaves. If I can just digress for 2 seconds, I don't want to hold you, but if you look at the Prime Minister's commitment in these very early stages of his government, he's been to Japan, he's been to Indonesia, he sent Richard Miles up to speak to the Chinese guy and try and get some rapprochement there going. Penny Wong hasn't been home for weeks. She's out there in Samoa and New Zealand somewhere. We hope she'll return. But he is not standing still. That's the message. And he is facing the tough domestic issues as well as these tremendously complex international issues. And he is seriously committed to shifting us as Australians from this blight that has affected us forever.
And while everybody's up, can I ask you to please keep your applause going for all of our speakers tonight? Now, we've got one last task this evening. Stay on your feet, because it wouldn't be a public forum, especially not one this big, if we didn't have a photo to prove to the rest of the country how strong our support is. So I'm going to ask all of the speakers just to come down off the stage in front of the group and the photographer to come up here. Your cap's still on. All right, count of three. Uluṟu. 1, 2, 3. Uluṟu! Maybe one more. Yeah. One, two, three. Uluṟu! 1, 2, 3, go one more. 1, 2, 3. Awesome, thank you. Thanks, Daniel. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night. Thank you. You were great. No, you can't. It was awesome. Well, a little boy, yeah. All right, how are you? Nice to meet you. Good, great. I'm Alex. Alex, thanks, mate.